My name is Marcus Gause, and I am the proud principal at the legendary James Vincent Dudley High School.
And my name is Eric Naglee. I'm the proud principal at the historic Page High School.
We are the co-founders of Greytexpectations. Great spelled Greyt, because we live in a world of gray. We have worked together to create a safe space where we can have conversations about race, class, and equity. After so much turmoil going on in the world, Greytexpectations does just that. So we want to go back because we want to share just a little bit about our story with you.
So we first met when we were graduate students at UNC Chapel Hill. We were in a cohort program that met in Sanford, North Carolina. We were traveling from Guilford County each day. I was a practicing Title I administrator in the Title I office, and Marcus was an assistant principal at Dudley, ironically, at that time. We just needed a carpool, so we started that process. We were going from Greensboro to Sanford, North Carolina every Wednesday and Saturday. So we carpooled during that time, and that's where our relationship really started. We had lots of in-depth conversations, whether that be about our families, our jobs, and then it led quickly to racial conversations that we'll talk about here in a little while. So Marcus, let's talk a little bit about where we grew up.
You sure you want to start there?
We have to.
All right. So I grew up in the metropolis of Supply, North Carolina, down on the coast between Wilmington and Myrtle Beach. Child number 4 of 7. And so we grew up in a pretty large family, close-knit community. And when I was in high school, you would look at me and think I was like this star athlete. I wasn't. That wasn't my gift nor my talent. Actually, music and the arts were my gifts. Although I participated in sports, that just really was not my thing. But music, I found a love for music that I still carry on today. But growing up in Supply, I learned a lot of the same values that I still kind of share today that kind of help model the way that I lead schools. The way that I lead schools is definitely about some of those same upbringings. So as we're traveling along, we learned that there was a lot of similarities between, the metropolis of Supply and where Eric grew up. So Eric, tell us a little bit about this little small town you grew up in.
So I grew up in Gainesville, Florida. So at that time, it was a very small, quiet town, college town where the University of Florida is located. It has become much more in the 20 years that I've left. So again, Gainesville, Florida. My family was a rather large family. I was one of 4 boys growing up. I went to Buchholz High School in Gainesville, Florida again, and I was a little bit opposite of Marcus. I cannot keep a beat. I cannot do anything musically inspired, any of that stuff. So I was an athlete in school, and the reason why that was very important to me is I learned to interact with a lot of people from different races. And learned a love for all people. And that's something my parents instilled in me at an early age. And much like Marcus, that is something that I use to be successful and show my love for all the kids that I lead at Page High School. So let's talk about Marcus at this point. Maybe one of those first experiences that we had when we really started talking about race. We both vividly remember that and the powerful moment that was that we spent together.
Absolutely. So, I think it's really important that we kind of share that we knew absolutely nothing about one another before these encounters started taking place and before we were in these particular classes. So we are really starting from a relationship from scratch. And so in the carpool line, being educators, not having any money, that was the first incentive for us to kind of get together, to kind of carpool back and forth to classes in Sanford through UNC Chapel Hill. And so on the way there, both of us really have lead feet. So we drive like we're driving planes on the road for the most part. And we're never on time. You would think that it was that we had not planned to be where we were supposed to be on time, but we were always speeding wherever we went. We could be
That's
early.
Correct.
Yeah. So this particular incident, which is like one of the pieces that I always think is like one of the very first pieces where I knew like that we were going to build a really strong bond and relationship was we were driving to class and I get pulled over and Eric is in the passenger seat and I get pulled over for speeding. I'm not going to confirm or deny whether I was speeding or not, but just got pulled over for speeding, and the officer immediately came up like he was on attack. like I had done something wrong. And he looked at us like, why is there a white man and a black man riding around in Sanford, North Carolina together? What are y'all doing? You got to be up to no good. And so I have been raised to like, make it home.
Right.
Don't cause a stink, like interact with them very politely and be nice.
Quite different than how I was raised to interact.
Right, which is mouth of the South. And so here we are, in the car interacting with the police, and he's like, what is he doing? Like, why is he talking to you like that? It's just speeding. I was like,
we're going to school.
Like,
What's
just hush.
This guy, right.
School, yeah, right. And it's like, so we're getting that kind of attitude back from the police department. So I'm over here trying to get him like, hush, like we're gonna get killed. Like, I'm black, like don't do this. So it kind of went from there where I realized that the interaction with the police was very different, and the way that you interacted with the police and your confidence level was very different. Because the piece that I failed to share is that prior to that, Eric received a citation for speeding. And his interaction was very different with the same officer. And so when we started talking about the differences in those interactions, it kind of led us to think through like, what's the difference here? We know that the only difference here between you driving and me driving was race. So we started having that dialogue about like, why was that a difference? And why was there such a different approach between how they approached you versus how they approached me? And so I think that kind of led to some really deep conversations about race that I think have kind of led to a bond that, made it really strong for us to kind of build a really strong relationship off of. And I'll let Eric tell you about this piece, but of course we still made it to class safely, right? And typically on the way to class would be the time when we would do our work, like with class. One person would be responsible for reading. That would be the person that took the notes, and we would share the notes, right?
Right, that's right.
And then the other person would sit in the passenger side and kind of write as we're driving to class, because, we're always late and speeding.
Right. We had a lot going on. We were educators at the time. We were raising young families at that time, and that was an ongoing joke as well about whose wife was pregnant next. Right,
Remember correct.
That was
you win.
Funny.
You won.
I did win that one. So leading on to that next piece at UNC Chapel Hill, I think, the other thing that one of the examples that really stood out to us was we were, as Marcus was sharing, we were talking a little bit about our papers. We were working collaboratively together. And then we turned in a paper we were supposed to focus on the same topic. Long story short, we got that paper back, and the feedback was quite different. Even though, quite honestly, Marcus spent much more time on this assignment than I had. I threw mine together on the way to class that day. And we were looking back through that rubric, and we compared them, and his feedback was quite different, which led to his grade being quite different. So again, as he's labeled me today, mouth of the South, I sort of, I was raised to advocate for what is right. So I would not let him back down to that. He was much more of, it's all right, I'm still going to have a B in this class. It doesn't really matter. But I was really pressing the envelope. I wanted him to advocate for himself, and I was going to be there beside him to support him in that work and show the paper that I had received back, and show the concrete examples of why I thought that was an issue as well. So I'll let Marcus talk a little bit about the next part, but I really pushed him that day, not only to advocate for himself, but also advocate for the people that come after him.
And I think just the point of clarity is that I do have quite a slick mouth as well. But I also think that it's important to note, we've had this conversation before as well about I've learned to kind of choose my battles about what things are pressing, because I can't fuss and argue about everything, and I can't take a stance on everything. But that piece was of critical importance to both of us. And I think that just kind of segues into like one of the things that I thought was important of how you push me to keep moving, because we're not just going to take a stand. So I think having an ally to be like, go get this, like, don't stop there was really important. So it's just that same kind of advocacy that I think kind of built a really strong bond and relationship for us that kind of led to some really, really important conversations. One of which, unfortunately, one of Eric's students passed away unexpectedly. And so we were talking, and he was saying, well, I'm going to go to the funeral. And I was like, okay, cool. But I'll be back in like an hour. I was like, no, you won't. You're going to a black funeral. Like, you might want to pack some snacks, get you some beverages, because we're going to be there for a while. So he sends me this text as he's sitting in service. It's like, we haven't even gotten to anywhere close to the eulogy. I was like, I tried to forewarn you to take some snacks with you, but you wouldn't listen. I know how we do this. And so we've had a lot of conversations just about like church, and his philosophy is if it lasts more than an hour, it's not of God. So he's just like, anything that goes longer than that, like I'm out. Like I can't focus that long. I was like, well, I'm accustomed to starting at 10 and ending at 2. So it's kind of, a kind of a norm for us. So I think it kind of allowed us to have some really, really natural conversations about race and questions that we didn't necessarily even know to ask or even know the answers to or feel comfortable to. So I think the relationship piece allowed us to really create a space where we could start having some real critical conversations about it.
Some of the other items that really stand out to me was the whole George Floyd incident. I know I quickly called Marcus to talk a little bit about how that felt. Being a white male, I didn't know how that would feel, what his perception of all that going on. So we spent a long time that day discussing how that felt, how his kids felt. You remember that, of how he would have to talk to his young people that he's raising in his house differently than how I would. But also from that, we talked about how I was talking to my 4 boys as well about what that looked like and how that would be different between my home and his home. We also talked recently and also a couple years ago with some unfortunate events that have happened here locally about how sentencing of people that have been convicted of a crime and what their bails may look differently based upon the color of their skin or their sentences may look like. So we focused a little bit about that and the perception that creates within our own community that we serve each and every day, both serving our students at both high schools we're at, but also our community at large.
Right, absolutely, which I think is really the segue of why we felt it of critical importance just to start Great Expectations, just so we can create the spaces to have like really conversations about race and class and equity without there being yelling and screaming and hollering and nobody's listening. And so we do it from a perspective of building a relationship first. And once the relationship begins, we can really start to delve into like some of those critical things that are impactful to different races, classes, and cultures. And so we are really proud of the work that we've done so far, but we're really excited just about where it's going, just because it gives us an opportunity to be a change agent, not only in our community, but hopefully in the world. So Great Expectations is just that. It really challenges everyone to kind of create that safe space wherever you are, like in the workforce, at church, wherever you may be, and to really build relationships so you can have those critical conversations.
So I think our big takeaway from today is, once you've been able to watch this, is to really sit down with someone who doesn't look like you, right? Ask them their story, ask them their experiences growing up, and also ask them about their experience in the workforce, in the world as an adult. We can gain so much from just sitting down, having honest conversations to, again, change our world, but also to change how you as an individual or in a leader in the world of education are able to impact the youth that you're leading and also the community that you're leading.
So our challenge to you today is to do something really simple to connect with someone that may not look like you, that you may not know very well, so that you can get to know them. So find a picture on your phone that's really important to you or something that's significant to you, and share that with someone that you may not know and have them to do the same. And I promise you that you'll find something in common. And those commonalities are what helps build strong, great relationships, and also the space where we can have those critical conversations about race that are so important to us changing the world. So our personal slogans that we want to share and in this segment is to always dream big. And whatever you do, remember that love always wins. Thank you.